The quantum set for Jingliu? Yeah, you heard that right. The Brilliant Stars Relic set can work pretty well for her. But how well exactly? Is it better than the Glacial Forest Ice set? Is it worth farming or switching your ice set over to? Well, in this video, I will go in depth and explain how the quantum set compares to the ice set. And please note that these differences are calculated using a typical Jingliu crit build, max level, and traces. If you're unsure what a typical crit build is, you can watch some of my other videos to understand what exactly a crit build is. So anyway, the quantum set is being considered for Jingliu because her light cone provides a defense ignoring mechanic that compounds with the quantum set's defense ignoring mechanic as well. Compared to the ice set, the quantum set is only better if the enemy has a quantum weakness to get the extra 10% defense ignore, giving us a total of 20% defense ignore. Otherwise, it only provides a base 10%. So combine that with our light cone, and that's a 32% defense ignoring ability. Now, more specifically, when enemies are not weak to quantum, and the relic set is only providing that 10% defense ignore, then the relic set is about 7% worse than the ice set. That's actually pretty good for a set that does not match the elemental type of the character. And then when the enemy is weak to quantum, it's only about 1 to 2% worse than the ice set. It's pretty interesting stuff. This is also when we aren't applying any other defense debuffs onto the enemy. Once we introduce some of those defense debuffs, the gap actually closes, and in some cases, the quantum set starts to surpass the ice set in terms of damage. So let's say we apply a 40% defense reduction. The quantum set surpasses the ice set against quantum weak enemies by about 1.5 to 2%. Not a huge amount, but it still surpasses the ice set. And then against non-quantum weak enemies, the quantum set is only about 5% worse than the ice set. You would think that the damage difference is a lot more, considering that the quantum set doesn't boost her ice damage at all, and that the 10% quantum damage is pretty much wasted on Jingliu. 5% might be a lot for some, but 5% might not be that much for others. Then if we apply even more defense reduction, 80%, then the quantum set surpasses the ice set by about 8%. And then against non-quantum weak enemies, it's only about 2.5% worse than the ice set. That, of course, is a ton of defense reduction. Now, talking in terms of percentages might not give you a clear picture on how much damage she's actually doing. So again, assuming my build, typical crit build, and max level and max traces, and she's also hitting against an enemy that is weak to ice and is also the same level, this is how we stabilize all of the defense multipliers and other things like that. The damage we're seeing with a 40% defense down enemy on an ice set is about 52,000, and then against a quantum weak enemy is about 53,000. So that difference is about a 2% difference. The quantum set is about 2% better in this case. And then the quantum set against an enemy that is not weak to quantum was dealing about 49,000. And so compare that to the ice set, that's about 5.3, 5.4%. So hopefully that paints the picture a little bit better so that you can decide whether or not you think that difference is worth it or not. Now, this is actually not anything new. The quantum set is remarkably generic. Even using Herta's Destruction Light Cone on the Fall of an Aeon, it's a very similar story. It's just that the damage differences are a bit lower. With the Herta Light Cone, a 40% defense reduced enemy is less than 1% better when using the quantum set against quantum weak enemies. And with 80% defense reduction against quantum weak enemies, it's better by about 4.5 to 4.7%. Just a little bit under 5% better. So again, to really take advantage of that quantum set, you need to stack on more defense shred in order to make it better than the ice set. Alright, now if you made it this far into the video, I'm going to go over calculations that I did for the differences in those two relic sets, including all of the defense shred multipliers that I added in for my Jingliu build. So let's really quickly go over this build. I actually went through this in my other light cone video. If you haven't watched that video yet, then you definitely should go ahead and watch that. So anyway, my Jingliu is going to be max level and her light cone also max level. Her attack is 4,667 after she has entered her spectral transmigration state and has gained the attack for draining her teammates' HP. Crit damage is at 247%, and that's attainable from a crit damage body, substats on relics, traces, a light cone, and this 25% comes from the 4-piece ice set, and this will obviously be removed if we're using the Brilliant Stars set instead. And just to demonstrate that, go ahead and change my set here, and it will change. So that our crit damage from our relics goes down to 0. as well as our crit damage here. Let's go ahead and change this back. Let's go through these calculations. First off is the comparison of all of the sets, whether the enemy is quantum weak, not quantum weak, and then we have our defense down, and then this one is 0% defense down. And we can see that in all cases, it's always worse. But in terms of the difference, it's very minimal. You can see 1.6% difference between quantum weak enemies and the ice set. And then when it's not quantum weak, it's 7% difference. And then moving down to 40% defense down, we can see now that the quantum weak option is now better than the ice set by about 2%, 2.2 to be more specific. And then when it's not quantum weak, then the ice set is still better. The quantum set in this case is now about 5.5% worse than the ice set. Then moving down to 80% defense down, we can see now that against quantum weak enemies, it's now about 8% better using the quantum set over the ice set. But still, when the enemy is not quantum weak, it's still worse by about 2.6%. And then moving down to On the Fall of an Aeon, 0 defense down, we see the same story. Quantum set is never better, but adding in 40% defense down, and then against quantum weak enemies, it's only slightly better. It's less than 1% here. You can see it's 0.7, so very low. It's really not that much better. And then against non-quantum weak enemies, it is now 7% worse, versus if we compare it back up here again, it was about 5%. And then moving down to 80% defense down, we can see that against quantum weak enemies, it's 5% better, a little bit under 5%. And then against non-quantum weak enemies, it's about 4.5% worse than the ice set. So this should give you guys a little bit more clear picture and all the calculations all shown on the screen. So hopefully this helps you out. So what exactly is the conclusion? The ice set is going to be in most situations better than the quantum set. In order for the quantum set to be better, you need to use Silver Wolf or Pela to reduce the enemy's defense further. And even when you do so, it's only a slight increase in damage compared to the ice set. So this means if you've already farmed an ice set for Jingliu, you don't really need to switch over to the quantum relic set. If you haven't yet farmed a set, you can consider the quantum set. If you're planning to use Pela or Silver Wolf, or even both on a Jingliu team, then you could take full advantage of the benefits of the quantum set. Also, if you want the guard set, the set that will give you damage reduction, perhaps you want to put those on your support characters. Or if you want to build another quantum character like Qingcui. So what relic set will you be using on your Jingliu? Let me know down in the comments, and in the meantime, you can watch my light cone analysis video that I will put a link to on the screen right now.